Okay. Hi, Ben.
Hey Ben, good to see you.
Oh, good to see you. We have talked once, and I follow you on social media. And what really got to me the time that when we talked, you emailed me and we started talking, is your energy and also your humbleness and your broad in your perspective of things. You go to many different places in when you talk about unhealthy people to be healthy. You're not narrow. I like that width of what you're doing. So I follow you, and I was very happy after we talked first time. We really hit on many things. So I think it's very important to, you're the first out in my video series, my own little video series, and I'm very happy for that. So tell me, why in the whole world are you doing this? What happened? How was it? What happened, and how is it now? Tell me that story.
Yeah, first of all, I'm honored to be the first in your video series, and I love the work that you're doing. And we did hit it off on our first conversation that we had. I reached out to you because I was actually looking for seminars and conferences that were teaching low carb, teaching keto, which is right up my alley. And then I came across your work, and you actually are using keto, ketosis, low carb in combination with other tools to really help with food addiction and carbohydrate addiction. And I have my own experience. So I thought that was super fascinating. I reached out to you. We had a great conversation. Since then, I connected with David Wolf, who's one of your students who came on my podcast. So you're doing amazing work. I follow you as well. So thank you for the kind words. So for myself, I'm somebody who went through my own health transformation. I used to be obese, 23 years old. Back in 2008, I found myself as a 250-pound man who was obese both physically and mentally. I had bad food addiction, carbohydrate addiction, looking for answers inside of my refrigerator when I knew the answer was not there, but it helped fill a void for me at that time. So this was a dark place during my life, throughout my life. This period was one of the worst times because I felt like I was rock bottom. I actually wanted to give up on life. I was looking for ways to do that.
Wow.
And I came across some books. I started to read books, and it really empowered me and helped me understand that I could be the victor here of my future and no longer stay that victim of the past. So I took ownership, and with that ownership, I started to really focus on my health, my nutrition, my exercise, and I took it one habit at a time, and I started to just stack these habits. And over time, this compounded to the point where 9 months after I made that decision to take responsibility, 9 months later, I went from 250 pounds as this obese man down to 170 pounds. I
Wow.
went from 34% body fat down to 6% body fat. So I finally carved out this physical six pack that I always desired growing up as a kid who was overweight. But the
So
most
did it
important,
start very early for you?
yeah, I was overweight my entire life. Yeah, I followed this standard American diet, which is, we know, high process, high sugar. So I was overweight my entire life, and that transition into my adulthood. My parents actually, my mom worked at a fast food restaurant, at two fast food restaurants growing up, and a Walgreens, which is like a pharmacy store.
Yeah, I know.
So she would bring me home, it was Kentucky Fried Chicken. She would bring me home fried chicken and macaroni and cheese, and I ate that. She did the best she can with her resources. So yeah, I was overweight as a kid. I was addicted to actually not just food, but video games and the wrong environment, the wrong friends growing up. So that really was a challenge to me as I made that transition and I achieved this physical six pack. But the most important thing that I achieved during my transformation here in those 9 months was a mental six pack. I really started to understand my thoughts and how we become what we think about. And if we could change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. And it really empowered me. And that's what got me started in the health space. That was back in 2008. And now we're fast forwarding 12, 13 years later to today.
Wow. Okay. Um, I'd like to mention that most people I work with, the absolute majority of people I work with, they can relate back to when they were 4 or 5 years old, that they had sugar cravings and they, rather stuck to fast food or sugar flour. type food instead of real food. Can you see that way back for you then?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that dopamine hit, that immediate gratification of
Yeah.
these processed foods. So
Oh,
sugar, anything that was highly carbs, highly sugar, I was going for that.
early on. You mentioned something interesting. I mean, I'm an addiction specialist. So I also work with other outlets. We say one illness, many outlets. And you
Mm.
mentioned games.
Hmm. Yeah,
When would you say that that started? How old were you then when you came into that?
I was a teenager, well, probably 13, 14 years old, and I put a lot of energy into video games, even as an early adult, up until 24 years old. It's interesting because when I achieved my health transformation, I stopped playing video games. I never went back to it. So I ended that outlet of addiction too.
Interesting, very interesting. You had a wonderful saying. May I borrow that from you in the future? Mental six pack.
Absolutely. You could
Yeah,
use it.
because I listened to a psychiatrist once. His name was Daniel Amen, if you've heard of him.
I know Dr. Amen. Yeah, he's got
Yeah,
some
yeah.
great
And
work.
he used the word when we eat like this, and I can relate to that. When I was active in my sugar and flour addiction, I had no mental horsepower.
Mm,
Yeah, and
that's
that
good.
that said a lot. Yeah, yeah,
I haven't heard that one before, so that's
yeah,
it's so true. I could relate to that.
yeah. And that's what I see with my clients. They think they are depressed. They think they have a lot of anxiety, and that's a consequence of the addiction. So what they actually have is the energy, and that's what I liked when you talked when I met you first time. The energy you have today, the energy you spread around you, because I think that this illness robs us of energy. So we have no
Mm,
energy, and then we keep eating to fill up with energy, which is a false energy that steals energy. It's like
mhm,
we take out more from the bank account that's ever there.
mhm.
So that's what you said, bankrupt. We are emotionally, physically, psychologically, socially, spiritually bankrupt.
Oh, so true. Great
Yeah,
analogy. Yeah, we're maxing out our credit cards here. We're just running
yeah,
on empty.
yeah, you got it. So what about right when you started, uh, you started your transformation, you came around some books, because I think, one of the saying we have is it's the start that stops us.
Yeah.
What's your
Yeah.
thought about, that? I think this is a very interesting book, because I see so many people that they are willing. I mean, they really want a different life, and they ask for help, but it's really hard to get them going.
Mhm.
Do you have any ideas, what can make that transformation in a person? That, okay, because being willing, just sitting here, I'm willing, it's not going to help. You need to go into action, right?
So true.
What was it? Can you share some of those things that made you go get it, so to speak?
Yeah, and I love it because my T-shirt that I'm wearing right now says "Action takers rule the world."
I love
It's
it.
a perfect, not intention takers or thought takers, but action takers. So,
Yes, right.
for my personal story, I had to hit rock bottom to wake up. I had to go through, I was actually on the internet looking for ways to kill myself. I was tired
Oh
of
my
living.
goodness. Oh.
Several times I went on the internet, and the only thing that stopped me bitten was thinking about my mom,
Oh,
thinking
okay.
about what she would have to deal with if I took my life.
Yeah.
But I was ready to take my life at that point. I was just hurting, confused, no goals, no ambitions.
Do you ever
So
drink or use other drugs, or nicotine?
I used other drugs, not nicotine, but I did weed a lot, smoked a lot of weed
Okay.
growing up, and also as an early adult. So yeah, I was addicted to those types of drugs, not smoking, not cigarettes or nicotine, but marijuana. So for me, I knew that I wasn't going to end my life because I love my mom too much. She's my superhero. She's done so much for me. I never wanted to do that to her. So I was forced to figure things out. And yeah, for months, I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to do that. I didn't take action. It wasn't until two friends of mine, Ronald and Carla, who actually happen to be married now,
Ooh.
they handed me a book and they said, read this book. I think it'll help you out with what you're dealing with. And the book was called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And the book talked about small little decisions that we make every single day determine our future, good or bad. And if you could just start stacking small little tweaks in your decision making and action taking each day, just small little steps and tweaks, then it could lead to giant peaks in life. So I thought, oh, that's really interesting. This is the concept of the compound effect, right? And habits could be good or bad, but they compound over time, they accumulate to our future. So that could be an amazing future with vibrant health and relationships and everything we want in life, or that could be a very unhealthy future. But it's those small decisions that we make every single day. It's those small actions, if you will. So that made so much sense to me, that book. And I started to just make small little steps each day. I started to add a workout, add a little bit more to the workout. And my goal was just to beat yesterday. If I could just be a little bit better today than I was yesterday, not just with my actions, but with my thoughts and with my gratitude practices, and just everything that I wanted to incorporate, just small little tweaks, beat yesterday. So I started to stack that. And then all of a sudden I found, and this is your field for sure, but all of a sudden I found myself, my brain, these new neural pathways started to get carved out. So instead of reaching for a bag of chips, I would want to go for a walk. Instead of, eating that food, I would eat something else. And I would now reprogram this mind, this brain of mine, to choose healthier habits. And an example I like to give, because one of the things that I wanted to do at that point was to actually listen to less music and spend more time listening to audiobooks. So here's a perfect example for your audience to understand this switch that I made, and hopefully they could apply it to what they're dealing with. When I got into my vehicle, my car, I always had the habit of immediately grabbing my phone and hitting the Spotify app and playing music. And I set out, I wanted to change that habit. I wanted to, instead of hitting Spotify and listening to music in my car, I wanted to listen to an audiobook or a podcast, something that was going to serve my future. But this was such a habit for many, many years. I didn't even think about it. I would go, I would hit Spotify, I would start playing. And then a few minutes in, I would be like, oh no, I said I was going to listen to an audiobook, and then I would shift it. Right. So this happened for days and then weeks. And then all of a sudden, as I kept becoming intentional with this thought and action, I found myself weeks in opening up the phone, getting into my car, opening up the phone and hitting a podcast or an Audible app instead of Spotify. So I made that switch. I craved that. I carved out that new neural pathway. So that was a huge shift for me. So that's what happened for me. I made these small little tweaks, and over time, my body and my subconscious mind accepted that. And then it was just a new habit.
I love that to say that, because I used to say you got to take baby steps. If you take too long steps, you're wobbly. Small baby steps, you're more stable. But you said something else that I think is so important, that I love to hear, that I also try to get the message through. And something I've thought about is when we have bereavement, grief, when we lose something, we are much more aware of that and see it as very, very sad to lose something. We always think, I can't do that anymore. I lost that. I lose that. I don't, whatever it is. And we don't focus on what we add. And you said you started adding. Mm-hmm. I love that talk, because that's what I think we should not. I mean, like with food, people say to me when I present, the food plan for a flour addict, they said, and I said, don't eat this, don't eat this. We lecture about that. Don't eat junk food, right? And then people look at me shocked and say, what is there left to eat? Yeah. And then I pull out the list with, everything you can eat, all the good stuff you can eat. And it's like they can't take that in. They can't see it. Yeah. So here's another switch for somebody, the brain is so hooked on the sugar, the hit, the keeping, and in the end, we eat not to be hangover, right? We don't get any fun from it anymore because we have depleted the system, the dopamine, upregulating, downregulating. But I think this is a very important thing to every day think about what you add. I love that. Very
absolutely
factor. And focus on that, and don't just refuse to look at what you cannot do. Why? Right. Yeah, add.
Why focus on the negativity and what you can't do when there's so much that you can do and you can have? And I would add to the list of that food that they could eat, I would add their body fat to that list as well.
That's a good point. I never thought of that. Oh, good. I love that. Yeah. No, but I mean, this is very important things to look at when you can coach people or inspire people, as I said, to start getting those baby steps out of
That's
their
right.
jail. Um, also, how long did it take before you could see yourself as a sugar addict? Let me put the question: did you view yourself as a fat person, or did you at that point understand your addiction?
So it's interesting because when I was going through my weight loss transformation, health transformation, I didn't see myself as a food addict or a sugar addict. It wasn't until I went through my transformation and I started to get healthier that I realized I was an addict. But when I was going through it, I didn't have the awareness. Now I did see myself and feel like I was a fat person, an obese person. That was my paradigm for most of my life. And it was interesting because even though I lost all the weight, I had single digit body fat. Um, it took me a couple years after that for me to actually understand that I was a lean person, a fit person, no longer this fat obese person. It took a couple years to shift that, and then as I started to do more work on myself and understand biochemistry, understand the body, and understand my body, I realized that I had really bad addictions. But when I had those addictions, I didn't have the awareness until I got away from them. So what you're doing, Ben, with your work is you're offering such a huge service to people because you help give them that awareness, and hopefully they don't have to hit that rock bottom or that really nasty place that I had to hit to wake up. You're offering them the awareness now and the steps to take action so they could break away from that addiction.
Yeah, the instrument sugar that we are working on really spreading so people could get access to it, that is actually racing bottom. We create a stage crisis so that they really see how bad their life has become. That's actually what we do with that. So that's right. But also, I wanted to ask you about something that I meet people with this illness do when I meet them, is that they constantly ask why. They think there is a why. Why do I do like this? Why do I eat this? Why? Why am I fat? Why? And that gets them stuck.
Mm.
How do you think about that? And how did you get out of that? Were you ever sitting there analyzing the why? Why me? Why?
Yeah, not so much seeking the why. I mean, when I was the victim, when I had the victim mindset, yes. But when I made the decision to take responsibility, no, no more. Instead of asking why, I started to ask how. How does the body work, right?
Yeah.
How how are neurotransmitters, working? How does dopamine work?
Yeah.
So I started to understand, and I really believe when you are competent in a specific topic, you become more confident, and there you could take more convicted action. So that's what happened with me. I started to study the body. So I never ask why. Now, when I do ask why, it's a different why. It is my purpose. Like, why do you want to get healthy? Why do you want to lose the weight? And peeling back that onion and looking at that why versus why is this happening to me? Why am I an addict? So that's a different type of why that I do recommend exploring.
Absolutely. I'd like to transfer the and analyzing why me to how can you do this?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
but
love
that's
it.
a different why. Yes. Okay, so what do you see around you today? What do you see when you look out in the world today, and how does it look?
Well, I'm in America, and America is a sick nation. And I know it's not just America, it's the world. But I know the stats in America, and here are the disgusting stats. According to the CDC, 1 out of 3 women are diagnosed with cancer within their lifetime in America. And for men, it's 1 out of 2. We know that 60%, at least 60% of Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic. 3 out of 4 of Americans are overweight or obese. We have autism on the rise. It's predicted that by the year 2032, 1 in 2 children will be born on the autism spectrum. So the question is this, Ben, are we designed for disease? Are we designed to just merely survive and go through all this sickness? And the answer is no. We were designed to thrive. I believe that we're all masterpieces because we are pieces of the master.
Yeah.
And if we could actually understand how amazing the body is and how incredible it is, as long as we could identify the interference, what is interfering with this body from healing, remove the interference, and then the body will heal. So when we look at America, the stat that we were talking about offline, the average American is eating 17 to 23 times per day, which
And
is
that shocked me when I saw that. So I made a screenshot of that one. I'm going to use that because I was, what? Can that be? Oh, yeah.
it's absurd, and a lot of people think that's ridiculous that I'm making up that stat. Well, first of all, let me explain where it came from, then I'll explain how it's actually true. The stat came from my colleague, Dr. Don Klum, who did a patient survey on hundreds of his patients over the years, and he wanted them to fill out a chart anytime they would spike glucose and insulin, right? So that is the definition of eating a meal. Anytime you spike glucose and insulin, so snacks included. And the average American did it 17 to 23 times per day. And if you think about that, it does make sense because you think about the almonds that they eat, right? I'm choosing healthy snacks here. Almonds, the kombucha, the yogurt, and then they wait a few hours and they have something else. They have maybe a protein bar, a protein shake. They're spiking their glucose and insulin 17 to 23 times per day. And now they're on this roller coaster of energy levels. And it's no wonder that they feel trapped with this addiction. So that's what we see out there, and it's not just America. I know you see it as well.
Yes.
And our message is so important because it helps those understand what's going on. And when you understand, you have this awareness, then you can make better decisions.
Yeah. I was just, what? Can that be true? And I started thinking, and you explained it. I said, yes, it is. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when this happening, can you briefly explain what's that doing to somebody's body?
Yeah.
If you eat 17 to 23 times a day, and let's say that it's not just healthy things,
right.
What's going to happen?
So we know that the pancreas is designed to produce insulin, a phase 1 insulin response, about twice per day, right? So what's going to happen is if you're doing that 17 to 23 times per day, you're going to end up burning out the beta cells in your pancreas, which is going to lead to insulin resistance. It's going to lead to obesity and type 2 diabetes, which is going back to that stat. At least 60% of Americans have diabetes or they're pre-diabetic. So that's one problem. You're going to get insulin resistant. The second problem is that you're going to have to rely on food every 2 to 3 hours just to survive, because the brain is now, and the body is now, a sugar burner. And let's say you made the decision to, stop the snacking. You're going to just have your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, nothing in between. It's going to be very difficult for you to make that transition, because when your brain is so used to a hit of glucose every 2 to 3 hours, now you're going 3 hours without food. The brain will send the body intense signals for carbohydrates, for sugar, to fulfill its desire for glucose, that glucose spike. So it'll make it very, very difficult. That's where ketosis comes into play. When you could increase your healthy fats and protein, you're going to feel much more satiated, and it'll make that transition much easier when you do stop the snacking and do practice maybe intermittent fasting eventually down the road. So yes, when you're stuck as a sugar burner, it's not a fun way to live. You have to plan out your days to make sure you have the snacks available, you have everything you need to get that glucose spike, and that's just not a fun way to live.
No, and I'm thinking here is a very good explanation that I also want my patients to listen to, because they have many times panic, anxiety, mood swings, crazy mood swings, irritation, anger, or want to cry and feel hopeless and I'm useless and all that. And actually, that's volatile blood sugar, and not people think it's always psychological. But if you treat your brain like that and don't give it the right food in the right amount of time during the day, your brain going to react in very crazy times. And sometimes I wonder when they say that, at least in Sweden, there's a big discussion that teenagers, young people, have such severely mental health today. They're very
Mhm.
depressed and a lot of anxiety and a lot of crazy things going on. And I said, what do they eat? Look at what they eat. Because when I go grocery shopping, I see sometimes, a lot of teenagers from school buying stuff, and it's always one of those sodas, energy sodas,
Yep.
with a lot of sugar, a lot of caffeine, and then, snacks and bars, chocolate bars, cookies, cakes, and that's what they eat instead of lunch.
Hmm.
And then they're going to keep eating that all day. So no wonder they are very depressed, have a lot of anxiety, feel very useless, worthless, and everything.
Yeah,
Because the
it's
brain going to send out very strong signals. I think that's good way of saying it.
and you know what, it's empowering to understand that, because you know that there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with you. It's a physiological response to the food that you're eating. So if you could change the food you're eating, you'll have a better physiological response. So that's so empowering. And it goes back to that commercial for Snickers, the candy bar Snickers. They have these commercials here which are really brilliant marketing commercials, but it shows somebody who is just hangry, right? They're being a jerk. They're not
Oh
themselves. And then
yeah,
they
yeah.
go,
I know. Yeah,
you're not yourself when you're hungry.
yeah.
Hungry.
Elton
Why
John,
wait?
among
Yeah,
others. Yes,
grab a Snickers bar, right? Because that's not the solution. Yes,
of
that
course
might
not.
make you feel temporarily good, but
Yeah,
it's exactly it. You're not going to be your real self when you are a sugar burner. We want to convert to a fat burner and have this metabolic freedom and flexibility.
yeah, yeah. One of my students said today in a training session we had, how could we ever end up thinking that junk food would build a body, build neurons, axons, dendrites in our brain, cells in our bodies, in our brain? How could we end up in that trap? Because
Right.
what you're talking about is giving people knowledge. And I say knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
So when people understand these things, take them through these things about the body and how it works, I think that gives a tremendous amount of power to change. And also we say that, we say about, I'm a recovering alcoholic. So after I learned I was an alcoholic many years ago and went into recovery, the old timers said to me, to drink on knowledge is hell. They meant that once I knew this, and if I went back to drinking, I would be
Mm.
sicker than I ever been. And
Mm.
that's what I see with clients that understand, the thing with sugar addiction. If you take that first bite and all hell break loose again, and you
Mm-hmm.
lose control and you're back, they say that I got sick of knowledge
Mm-hmm.
by
That's a
knowing
great
this.
saying. Yeah.
And
And the
and that's
opposite.
good, as long as they reach out for help.
Yeah.
Because to pull yourself from the bootstraps up from that ditch once you derail, many people think that they are a failure and losers. I wasn't good enough doing this. And I really want to tell people that this is powerful stuff that we talk about. To derail is okay. Get your butt up on the road again
That's right.
and don't feel bad about it. Ask for help. That's very important. That's how you get back and say, hey, Ben, I ate this and that the other day and feel shitty. Can you help me back on track?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
absolutely best thing you can do. And then
Yeah.
give knowledge about that. Okay, why did you derail? We could look at some of those things. What were the little things? Well, I got stressed at work and I missed dinner, and then I was really hungry and I had to go grocery shopping, and the brain took over. The
Mm-hmm.
brain took over. You said another very interesting thing, thinking about, when I work with clients, I said it takes about 2 years to rewire your brain. You
Oh,
said
interesting.
something about 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It took me 2 years to, understand that I was no longer that fat, obese person, and I was
Yeah,
actually a
right,
lean person.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
isn't that
that
interesting?
yeah, that is interesting. So 2 years to rewire the brain. I thought it was a lot less than that. So that's super interesting. And that is exactly what happened with me. Now, 2 years on average, I'm imagining. So that means somebody could do it in a year. Somebody might be 3 years, but 2 years on average.
2 years on an average to relearn a lot of new behaviors, to
Huh.
reconnect all the parts of the brain. Because when you were where you were when you hit rock bottom, it was probably just your reward center and your reptilian brain that worked, your survival brain, and get the next hit. and you had no energy, no joy, no interest in other things, just to get your hit. So for the new neurons, we can never take away, the powerful impact addiction had, like what we call addiction memory circuit, how it felt when it felt good in the beginning when we did the drug, and what we call the euphoric recall, So anytime we feel stressed, that memory can come back. That's not dangerous. We don't have to cave into it because we have tools, craving management tools. But before we have done, so we can't take away the old connections, but we do new ones. And that's what you talked about. You started doing new stuff. That's what I call the brain bypass. You create a new neuron pathway beside the bad one. But then I want to ask you about another thing that I think is interesting. When I work with people, they say like this, that during that part, I said, why don't you take up this? Or why don't you start doing this? And why? And they said, no, it's so boring. It's boring. That's a common word when you work with addict. It's boring because they don't have a pleasure pathway for that new doing. So out walking can feel very boring because you haven't made that brain bypass, so you don't get the kick from it in the beginning. And here's where I said, train like an athlete. Do it again and again. And I say to my clients, oh, it's boring. I don't care. I said, do it anyway. Just do it. This is the trick. So, I'm thinking about when you started the exercise, maybe you took, I don't know, a 15-minute walk first, and then a 20, and is that the way you did it? I don't think you went out running 5 miles.
Correct. Right away. I started low and slow, and I built from there.
Low and slow. Yeah.
Exactly. So that I love that recommendation. Here's what I was going to say. As you were sharing that, I was thinking, I have a great share, because you're so right. It might not be fun at first. It might feel boring. You might think it's boring. And it might suck, that's the truth. When you embark on new goals, especially goals that are going to challenge you and change you for the better, it could suck. I remember when I was exercising for the first time, I would be sore for days and it sucked. I remember going to events like barbecues and birthday parties, and I was committed to this new way of living, a healthier way of living. And I would say no to chips and no to beer. And friends made fun of me right at that time, and it sucked. But I have a formula for success that I like to share. And that is, you're going to say something?
No, I'm waiting. Okay. I'm excited.
I have you on the edge there.
Yeah. I love it.
My formula for success is suck, cess. Okay.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to steal that from you.
You could use it. Yeah. Embrace the suck. So it's that walk that you might think that it's going to suck and you're not going to have fun. You just embrace it, you just do it, and then you just keep going forward. All of a sudden you find yourself being successful. So that's a philosophy that I've adopted personally over the years, and I hope your audience adopts that as well.
Yeah, I love it. We're going to use that, I promise you, because what I explained to them, which is much more boring and still sounds boring, is you have to learn to live with delayed gratification. I mean, how fun is that? Yeah. You hear, bleh. That success is much better. Yeah. So that explains it better. I love it. Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, so about 2 years to rewire the brain. It doesn't mean that you sit on your butt or something for 2 years and just live a very, very boring life. Not at all. But what I'm saying is, before you're really stable and have, all the wiring to your prefrontal cortex, to your limbic system, to your neocortex, before all that brain is lit up, it takes about at least 1.5 to 2 years, which means that people, knowing that could be like, oh God, how am I going to do that for, all that time? I don't even have the energy to take one step. And here I think it's important, with support. So what kind of support did you have? Did you have anyone that a day when you were low and somebody that, if you and I were friends I could call you and say, hey, Ben, just for today, come on, Ben, and you would do the same to me. Because that's something I see that people can really get some energy from.
Yeah,
Where did you
absolutely.
find your support? Where were your people, supporting you?
For the first year or two, I didn't have a support system in terms of many of my friends and family. Now there were a couple of friends for sure who were there for support, but for me, it was actually books. I
Oh,
believe
yeah, really?
books.
Yeah.
Yeah, books saved my life. I really uh, dove into books. I developed that habit of reading books, 30 minutes to an hour every single day. And it really helped me stay on course, but also getting clear on my why. Why did I want to get healthy? Why did I want to lose the weight? And peeling back that onion to get really solid. I believe when the why is strong, the how becomes easier,
Yeah,
and your
absolutely.
reasons come before the results.
Yeah.
So uh, I think it is so important to have an environment that is structured for your future self, the healthier version of yourself, because we do become our environment. So for me, although I didn't have that support system in the beginning, what I did do was cut a lot of people out of my life who are not supportive of my new habits and my new way of being. People who were actually not even not supportive, but they were actually the opposite of, attempting to influence.
Saboteurs.
Sabotage, yeah, saboteurs, yeah. So that was very difficult for me to do, even to this day, to cut people out of your life, or even just to spend less time with them. And it could be family members, it could be friends, but I call them crabs in a bucket. Have you ever heard that story, crabs in a bucket?
No, no.
So I'll share that real quick. When it turns out, when you put crabs in a bucket, let's say, for example, in that I have a bucket here with 20 crabs without a lid in that bucket. I could leave that bucket here with 20 crabs, leave for the entire day, leave at night, come back tomorrow morning, and I'll look down and all 20 crabs will still be in that bucket. And you might be thinking, why didn't they just escape for freedom? Well, they did. Anytime a crab tried to escape for freedom, the other crabs will drag it back down, pull it down, claw at it, and not let it leave and escape for freedom. So we need to determine who are the crabs in our life, who are dragging us down, who are the crabs in our bucket, and cut them out of your life or just spend less time with them. Find the people who are going to uplift you and charge you and encourage you, like Bitten and I. We are going to help you out and we're going to support you. And they're out there. It's just a matter of making that switch. So it is important. I did that eventually. I started to add people to my support system and get mentors and all that. But at the beginning, it was just me and books,
Yeah.
reading every
Well,
single day.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. That could be beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. I learned early on, stay away from people, places, and things that hinder your recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
that was
true.
sort of the same thing. And as you said, I think it's great that you pointed out that that is not an easy thing to do.
No.
It can be very painful. It can be very tough to do. But you have to put yourself first. And that was another thing, that I wanted to the saying that walk the walk.
Mm-hmm.
I feel you're really walking the walk, talking the you talk the walk. I mean, you do what you tell people to do.
Thank you,
And
Ben.
so that you are true to yourself.
Yeah.
You put you and your recovery first.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
see any, do you ever run into a problem today with that, a situation or somewhere where people question you, or that they think you eat weird, and why aren't you normal? And I mean, many of us, me and my clients and colleagues, we can hear that. I don't hear it anymore so much because people know so much. I've written books, people know
Right.
I'm a sugar addict. So, but in the old days, I got that question a lot, or like pointing it out to me that you're not normal. How long are you going to eat that sick food? And that.
Yeah.
Do
Oh,
you
yeah.
ever meet that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know why I believe it happens still to this day for me? Because when we start to change, it triggers people. It really does trigger people. And we become a threat to all of those people who are not changing. It
Yeah.
points a mirror to them. And how come they're not doing keto or eating healthier? So, yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the weird looks. When I'm at restaurants and I'm asking the waiter or the waitress, what oils do you cook with? I can't eat, I'm allergic to vegetable oils. Yeah, I have the whole table looking at me like, what are you
Yeah, I
talking
do.
about,
Yeah,
Ben?
I do the same. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I'll
Yeah,
accept
me
that
too.
because
Yeah.
I'd rather do that small bit of feeling uncomfortable than take that hit from the toxic bad fats that are cooked, the
Of
foods are
course.
cooked in. So
Yeah.
absolutely. But when you're so, like I said before, when you're convicted and you're competent with what you're doing, you're going to be much more confident. So it comes from your conviction. The person with more conviction is going to win. And if you love yourself, if you understand yourself, and if you're convicted in who you are as a person, then all of that just deflects off of you. I learned a long time ago from Bob Proctor that it never matters what somebody says about you. What matters is what we think after they've said it. And the truth is, most people are not even thinking original thoughts. They have the same paradigm with the same negative thoughts, and they're just not creating an original thought. I have a great quote from Bob Proctor. He said, 2% of the population think, 3% of the population think they think, and 95% of the population would rather die than think.
I love
nobody's
that.
nobody's thinking it's unless they hit like an emergency, or they're active at changing that
Yeah.
paradigm, is when people start to think. So I understand that. So whenever I get a comment, even like on social media, because I'm very active on there, there's going to be some hateful comments. But again, it doesn't matter what they say. What matters is what I think as a result of what they've said.
I love it. Two more things, and I'll let you go. I mean, I could talk for hours to you. I realize
Yeah,
that,
me too.
it never ends. Um, Christmas is coming,
Yeah.
and that's one thing we're going to talk about. But I also want to mention intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Because for the people that I work with, we say don't use the word fasting in the beginning, because an addict is black and white in his thinking. They could think fasting is starving for 4 days, or whatever. I mean, they have
True.
addicts are either on or off. I mean, my friends used to say about me, Bitten thinks that if one is good, 40 is better. I mean, we were all or nothing, that mentality as an addict. Either
Yeah,
we
I've
did
been
it or
there.
not. You know what I mean.
Yep.
So I'm thinking about just to the listeners now that do have an addiction, that we recommend not fasting. We talk about restriction, cutting down from 17 to 23 times eating to
Right.
2 to 3. I just want to say that in the beginning, at least the first 2 years, when you're very unstable still, while your brain heals. That's just, otherwise, everything you say is, you just use it. A lot of the keto people use that word, but it has to be explained to my clients. That's why I do it.
Totally.
Yeah. So that, and now we are, this is not going to be until after Christmas, I think. Maybe I can have time to put it out. We'll see. But any Christmas, Easter, I'm thinking about the thing when the people around you try to manipulate you. You were coming to me, and I of course is active in my addiction, so I've made everything, and I said, but Ben, I made all of this just for you.
Yeah, I've been there a lot.
Yeah, I know, and this is what my clients feel so bad about. They feel so bad about letting somebody down. So what's your take on that one?
Yeah, great question. That's a really good question, because it's so common, and that's where a lot of people get sabotaged, because they feel
Yes.
bad. Their mom, their dad, their friend's mom, their girlfriend's, their mom.
Just for today, it's
Yeah, just for
Christmas,
this.
Ben.
Exactly. I would say this. There's a book out there called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. The author's name is Bonnie Ware.
Yeah.
And Bonnie Ware was a hospice nurse in Australia. And
Yeah.
she interviewed hundreds and hundreds of patients that were on their deathbed. And she asked them, what is your biggest regret? And she compiled that in a survey, put it into a book. The number one regret of the dying in her surveys was not living a life true to themselves, but living a life of what others expected of them.
Yeah.
Which goes right back to this point.
Yes.
It's important to not have that regret. We don't want to have that regret. And that regret is so common. So personally, here's what I do. And maybe this could help your audience. I will communicate to the person making the food ahead of time. I'm like, look, I'll either say I'm working with a health coach, I'm working with a practitioner, I'm paying a lot of money to make sure I'm getting healthier. I don't feel so good right now. and I want to make sure I get healthier, and I want those to support me. And I have things that I am not going to eat right now. Maybe in the future I might add it back in, but right now it'll lead to a destructive path for me. And I know you don't want that for me. I know you want the best for me. So right now I'm not having XYZ, but I am having, A, B, C, D, E, F, giving a whole bunch of options of things you can have, things that could be optional. So I would say to have that conversation before you're actually there at the table, because it'll make it a lot more easier, and structure trumps intention. You might have an intention to communicate this when you're there, but then you're there, you have the peer pressure, and you're going to be much more likely to cave into that. But if you had the structure and you had that conversation beforehand, then you're going to be in control instead of it being controlling you.
Yeah, because, and that reminds me of the cue-induced craving, that once the pathway is made in our brain, smell, sight, thought about, the drug food will actually activate the system so that our resistance lowers tremendously. So it's no good idea to think about saying that to the cake ladies once you are at the cake tasting party and you stand there and see all of that and smell it. Forget that. The monster has already taken over, Yeah. So you're hijacked already.
Yep.
So that's
I've been
good.
there a lot.
Yeah. So we have to be ahead. We have to go ahead. We have to think about, I like to say to people too, that think every evening, think about, is the risk situation tomorrow? What am I doing tomorrow? Am I going to be in a stressful situation? Am I going to, something special going to happen? All the things, is there a risk that I would get cravings, would end up in a situation? So prepare for one day at a time, think about that. So that's like brushing your teeth, thinking risk situation tomorrow. Oh, what am I going to do? When I can ask Ben, have you done that, Ben? Have you been there? How did you do it? I can ask people, how did you do it?
Oh, that's so
That's
good.
4 or 5 people. Yeah.
I love that, because you take decades and you turn decades into days. You could learn, stand on the shoulders of giants, people who have been there. So great advice, Ben. I love that.
Yeah. So what are you going to do for the holidays?
I'm going to have 2 Christmas dinners, one on Christmas Eve with my girlfriend's parents. They live here. We're going to be having dinner with them. And then on Christmas night with my mom. So I'm going to have 2 Christmas dinners. I'm going to eat a lot of protein and fat.
Good.
And then, I'm going to spend some quality time with my girlfriend and my mom. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to, Swedish Christmas food is low carb. I mean, it's a lot of protein and fat,
Yeah.
We go for the ham and the meatballs, and, and my sister, she makes an omelette that's to die for. Baked in a water, in a tray with water in it.
Yeah.
In the oven. And I mean, it's absolutely smashing. So, I usually eat a lot of that. And
sounds delicious.
The veggie could be a little bit of kale. Yeah. So, and Brussels sprouts. That's about, very Christmassy.
Yeah, great. Yeah. It's green, right? Very Christmassy.
Green, right.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciated this. And I love to put this out. And if I can make it, we do it before Christmas. Otherwise, it's going to be right in the beginning of January. So you're the first out anyway. And I'm very happy to have you on board. And I might get back to you. And, after a while, we talk again. What have we come up with? Because I think we come up with things when we talk. I hear that. You give me ideas I can ask you this and I say this and you start thinking about this. So I like that.
Amen. I love that too. Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. You're doing